question I get asked a lot since getting the Steam Deck is that the Switch Pro? The other question I get asked a lot is what are my favorite games I'm playing on it? Now this seems a little silly question to me, considering that it can play anything a PC can play. Why even discuss it? But that got me thinking, are there any games that are designed in such a way to as to benefit from being on this device? Now the obvious inspiration would be most other gaming handhelds, particularly the Nintendo Switch. I know some might be rolling their eyes with these Switch comparisons, but this is really the closest comparison there is. No need to reinvent the wheel. Best develop on the works of others. Older gaming handhelds like the DS and Game Boy line can be looked at for some inspiration. Let's assume you only have a Steam Deck and nothing else to game on, and you're playing on battery only. No chargers or batteries or external devices available. Highly unlikely for most people, but that makes for a more interesting scenario to talk about. Since the Steam Deck is similar to the Switch, you can use Nintendo first-party titles to think of what best to play on deck. The first-party titles are not just system sellers, but can also be looked at as Halo products like Google Pixel phones or Microsoft Surface products. A way of showing developers what's possible on their platform, and in this case what might work best on it. This is why you got all these weird implementations of hardware like how 1-2 Switch uses the sensor in the Switch Joy-Con that I can't think of a single other game using. There seems to be three kinds of games that dominate the Switch. The easiest examples are Mario Odyssey, Zelda Breath of the Wild style games, an indie game. When you strip away the Mario aesthetic, the games essentially break down to running around a sandbox to achieve some general overarching goal, followed by completing smaller challenges that are often unlocked until this general goal is achieved. Zelda, on the other hand, is a full open world where you wander around and do small goals to take on a handful of main goals in order to beat a boss. Arguably, they are the same game, just taking opposite approaches. Now I know I'm simplifying. I know about the emergent gameplay mechanics in both games, how jumps can be chained in Odyssey or the chemistry engine in Zelda, but this is not supposed to be a full analysis and breakdown of each game's mechanics, rather how they organize their gameplay. I'm saying that these games are designed specifically to take advantage of this portable form factor and to showcase its power. They are games that are good at letting you play them for short amounts of time, but have parts that you could sit down and play for hours if you have time to do so. Now then, what games that aren't released by Nintendo have similar quality? While most sandbox and open world games benefit, their plethora of side activities makes them a perfect fit. That means that every GTA and Rockstar game should be great, provided you can deal with the Rockstar launcher. Ubisoft games work too because of this collect X of Y structure most of their games use. Bethesda games work great too. From Software games, aka the Dark Souls, Elden Ring games work great too. Level and round based games like racing and fighting games would also be ideal for their brevity. Finish a couple laps or the typical 3-round structure and you can pause the game or put the console to sleep. Again, most indie games are great on it because of the shorter experience and tendency to level structures in general. The official top 10 most popular games on deck confirms my theory with the popularity of Spider-Man, Elden Ring, Skyrim, No Man's Sky, and Stardew Valley. The first three of which all have a bunch of side activities to do. Older style console games that are similar in structure to 8 and 16-bit games, the NES, SNES, and Genesis style of games would be good for short-term gameplay. They are a joy to play on this. A lot of PS, N64, Sega Genesis games work great on here too. The reason for these working great, even though they don't generally hold up too well, is that they also tend to be shorter level-based experiences, since games at that time still tried to bring in that structure from the NES era, and processor limitations didn't really allow for massive continuous levels to be structured. All games from the 6th gen of consoles, PS2, GameCube, and original Xbox are great experiences because of their average game length. We tend to forget, but a lot of those games are really short experiences, often lasting 8 hours for a long game, even when they aren't obviously level structured. Like the God of War games that lasted only 5 hours. They would play well with the battery life of the deck provided you have the right dumping tools or access to a time-traveling pirate ship. Oddly enough, heavily story-driven games probably benefit the least from this form factor, though nothing is stopping you from playing it on here. I tend to be the kind of person who approaches story-driven games with the intent to go play it for a few hours, which would kill the battery. A lot of these games tend to have more spread out save points too, which means they aren't as conducive to playing on the go. And newer games tend to save every 3 seconds, but once you start going to older games, it can be a bit of an issue. Think of things like Portal and Half-Life that don't save very frequently by modern standards. Of course, this device can run them, but it requires thinking about battery life and saves. Let's explore how to best play games on the deck that don't necessarily benefit from this form factor. The obvious thing you can do is put the game to sleep, or preferably put it on pause and then sleeps, since some games may not play as nicely with the sleep feature as you'd expect. Since that's the case, you should take some other things into account too. Also, as far as I can tell, putting the console to sleep doesn't drain the battery at all. With some older games, having spread out saves, or maybe even no autosave at all, means you will need to get into the habit of periodically manually saving to make these games more suited for portable gaming, which you could do quickly by mapping quick save and quick reload to one of the rear paddles. So if you suddenly die or mess up your progress on certain parts of a challenge, it's a quick reset. This was a common feature seen on Game Boy and DS line of consoles, most notably on the original Pokemon games that let you save wherever you want, provided you weren't in the middle of a battle or a dialogue. Most PC games usually default to multiple saves, so if you save yourself into a corner and end up in an area that might be impossible to pass with a quick save, then you can load an even earlier save. Yeah, save scumming can be considered a bad way of gaming, but not all of us have the time to retry parts of a game for hours at a time, and if you are out and about, you probably need to be able to put the game away at a moment's notice. Some games even have mods that allow for quick saving, or allow you to put up a developer console that allows you to manually save the game. Now, is multiplayer conducive to this form factor? It all depends on context. Well, battery life is an issue, but based on my testing, this may not be as big of an issue as many would think. Multiplayer games tend to be less demanding, de-emphasizing graphical prowess for performance. One of the big issues is latency added by playing games over Wi-Fi when playing competitively. Yes, you could get an adapter to eliminate this, but this would require getting a long enough cable to play comfortably. I would not recommend CSGO or TF2 on this because playing these games with a joystick against a random player is not the best. Now the trackpads and gyro could make up for this, or the use of the flick stick control scheme might yield good results, but I don't know of anyone who can say they have been able to win competitively at a reasonable level with these methods. But hey, most people probably don't even know of the advantages of either control scheme, so as far as I'm concerned, it's to be determined. Games that usually utilize controllers should be great, of course, like Rocket League or any third-person action-adventure game like a MGS5. Fighting games are another obvious choice for competitive gaming. There's also remote play together, where one person runs the game and one owns a copy, and friends can be invited to play with you. They are probably playing on controller too, since co-op is common to use for remote play together. So no concern with anyone having a big edge. Same goes with the emulation of things like the Wii, so you could play with friends online since it had online multiplayer that was replicated on Dolphin. Even if you don't have a USB-C hub, you could stream the deck's screen to a TV or phone via the Steam Link app and use the Steam Deck as a controller while someone else uses the controller to play. Some people have even found ways of making remote play together work with emulated games too, though I don't know how to get it working myself. All this to say, Steam Deck local multiplayer and online multiplayer is mostly great with games that use controllers because of the low power use. Competitive multiplayer is probably not going to be great, but some experimental control schemes show potential to make it worth it. Speaking of remote play together, has anyone tried playing with friends locally with their Steam Deck? Like two friends meet and bring their Steam Decks to play against each other in a car? I haven't seen this done yet. Granted, I'm sure you could do it via LAN connection from a USB hub or by making a phone into a hotspot or using your home Wi-Fi, but I'm not sure if it's viable in a place like a park or while on a road trip with no signals at all. Would be interesting to see if Wi-Fi play would be viable without a normal network being used, just two Steam Decks connecting to each other. Maybe one of the Steam Decks could be turned into a hotspot. This could be taken further and connect them directly via LAN connection via USB-C to Ethernet adapter like an old school Game Boy for minimal latency without some kind of switch or Ethernet hub. Why yes, there is a USB-C to X adapter for almost every connection you can make to PC. Assuming this does work, then any local co-op game would benefit greatly from this, giving each player their own screen and lessening the drain on battery remote play together would cause. There you have it, my take on what games play best on Steam Deck. Again, none of this is to say a different style from what I mentioned aren't great to play on the Steam Deck. I personally love story-driven games the most and actually finished a couple on a Steam Deck. Having all the advantages of a PC means anything you like goes, but there is no denying certain games are better on the Steam Deck than others. Have fun!